Good afternoon. Let me start by apologizing for interrupting your lunch and interrupting your conversation. But we would like to start. My name is Arjan de Haan. I am the director of the Inclusive Economies program at Idrc. Idrc is Canada's International Development Research Center, which is part of Canada's International Development Programming. And it is within that program, you've met my colleague Montarsa and Irina, that we very proudly host the Center of Excellence for CRVS systems. So it is my pleasure and it's my honor to welcome you colleagues, friends from all over the world, excellencies, people from international organizations and NGOs. This is a fantastic group of people. It is I think truly astonishing and very important that we get so many people together with such busy schedules on a topic of civil registration and vital statistics. This is when I tell this to my colleagues in communication at Idrc. We have a meeting that has the title Civil Registration, Vital Statistics and Identity to Leave No One Behind. They asked me if I can reduce that to about 1/3 of its size. But this is truly really important. Civil registration, vital statistics are absolutely important, underlying all the sustainable development goals. If we don't know where the population is, what the composition of the population is, we will miss opportunities for good policy. Idrc supports research for development, and we know that without those statistics we can't even do good research, or research will be very costly to inform the policies that are needed to help us achieve the sustainable development goals. And I think that is particularly important when we think about leaving no one behind, and we will hear a lot about that. Leaving no one behind is almost by definition is almost identical with a lack of identity, without registration, without the means in which people can be included in functioning of society, benefit from government policy. So once again, it is truly an honor to be doing this work. It's absolutely fantastic that we're doing this work with such great partners, and I want to thank particularly our partners here at UN, of course, UNFPA, that of course have been instrumental hosting this meeting, and of course very grateful for the partnership with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and with that I'd like to turn over to Claire, and thank you again so much for working together on this.
Thank you very much, Arjan, and thank you so much to the Centre of Excellence for CRVS systems at the IDRC and the UN Stats Division have been such great partners in this work. We've really enjoyed it and working together on something of such critical importance. I thought I'd just say a very few words just to remind everybody about why we're here today and the importance of the issue. At the Global Partnership, we care about data because we care about people. And we're committed, and through the partnerships that we build and the work that we do, to ensuring that everyone is counted by improving the production and the availability and, most importantly, the use of data to inform those decisions that affect everybody's lives. And of course, we know, all of us, and the reason we're here today is that too many people are missing from the data, and too many governments don't have an accurate count of their population. Let's just remember some of the data about the data, that the average birth registration globally is 73%. And in some regions, in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, less than half of all children under 5 have had their birth registered. And approximately 50% of the world's deaths are not registered. And in the week that saw the signing of the UN Declaration on Universal Health Care, the implications of not knowing what people are dying from if we're trying to run an effective health system and improve outcomes and get the right healthcare to the right people at the right time, almost doesn't bear thinking about. According to the World Bank, roughly 1 billion people can't prove who they are for lack of recognized identity documentation. And of course, this is not some random set of people. It's not a random set of children who are not registered or a random group of people who lack identity. It's the most vulnerable populations, those people who are already suffering from multiple discrimination and inequalities. They are the ones who go uncounted and who can't realize their rights, can't participate fully in the economy, and can't access critical services. So to correct this injustice, we work with partners across sectors, bringing different data sources together to advance the SDGs agenda. And at the Global Partnership, we're big fans of new technologies and the use of satellite imagery and mobile phones to enhance data systems. But we're here today because we also believe deeply that foundational data systems, getting the basics right, like CRVS, are the absolute bedrock of everything else that we do, and have the key to benefiting from the new technologies relies absolutely on good foundational systems, a census, civil registration, vital statistics, identity. So that's why we're so excited to be collaborating with the Centre of Excellence on this compendium of good practices in linking CRVS and identity management. And it's that sharing good practices, encouraging governments to talk to each other and understand the successes and the challenges that each face, that is one of the key things that we do at the Global Partnership, and ways in which we hope we're helping in a small way to achieve the better data systems that we all want. We want to understand through this compendium how to share the experiences of countries that have strengthened these systems and show how they've improved the delivery of services and ultimately improved people's lives as a result. So we're very delighted today to be hearing from 3 of the countries that are featured in the compendium and of several key actors that are working also together to advance the CRVS and the ID agenda. And it's this holistic approach, linking CRVS to identity management, and the holistic approach that can transform how governments can empower and provide for their populations. We're very proud to be working with all of you on that. We're looking forward to launching the compendium at the Conference of African Ministers responsible for CRVS in Zambia next month. Thank you, Minister, for your generous hosting. And we're happy to be sharing the compendium synthesis report with you today. So we're very happy that we have, I think, pretty much a full house for this incredibly important topic at what is possibly the busiest UNGA on record. It certainly feels that way to me. So we urge you to listen, to learn, to enjoy your lunch, and of course, most critically, to think about what action you will take when you leave the event today, to help to build this foundational data that can navigate our way to the SDGs and make sure that we do keep the promise to leave no one behind. So now I'm very pleased to hand over to my wonderful colleague and architect of many of the good words that you're going to be reading in the compendium, Jenna Slotin, the host of our first panel.
When we do these chairs, I always feel like we should leave no short person behind. So, this is my constant UNGA challenge. Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Claire said, what a full room for such an important topic, but during a very important week. And I think it's critical that we're making time for civil registration and vital statistics and identity management during this week, because it's so closely linked to all the issues that we're discussing, and it really provides the foundation, as Claire said. But, so where do we begin? Where do we begin in understanding how to strengthen civil registration and vital statistics, and where do we begin in understanding the holistic approach that needs to be taken to integrate and link these systems and really provide for all people in the world? Well, we listen to those who are trailblazers. We listen to the countries that are on the path, that have made tremendous efforts already. As Claire said, we have 3 of the countries that are featured in this compendium with us today, represented on the panel. And I'm really delighted that we're going to be hearing and learning from their experience today. So I'd like to quickly introduce everyone. First, we have the Honorable Minister, Obeth Kenjose, the Minister of Economic Planning and Director General of the National Planning Commission of Namibia. We have Mr. Frans Rykers, Strategic Advisor for Identity Innovation at the National Office for Identity Data in the Ministry of the Interior of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And lastly, Mr. Vicente Tayano Gonzalez, General Director of the National Civil Registration and Identification Agency of Ecuador. All 3 of these panelists are deeply steeped in this work. They have tremendous and deep backgrounds in civil registration and vital statistics and identity management, and we're really looking forward to hearing from them today. So first, I will ask each panelist a couple of questions, and then we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. So let me turn first to you, Minister. Your country has made enormous progress on integrating CRVS and identity management in the last few years. Coverage of registration and vital events has really skyrocketed, and more people than ever understand the value of having a legal identity. Can you tell us what motivated your government to invest in these systems, and were you able to partner with communities to create demand for such documents?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, and I'm really delighted to be with such an auspicious gathering. Namibia has a very long history in the registration process of identities, the management of social protection services, distribution of all kinds of registration for marriage, divorces, and so on, long before independence. So social protection services for the elderly, for the vulnerable groups, the orphanages, registration of birth, deaths, and all the like has been ongoing. So the culture has actually been pre-existing, and it has carried on and actually extended and entrenched itself in the provision. So there wasn't much needed except to proliferate the services to the region. This is a country that is about 825,000 square kilometers by size. We have a population of 2.5 million people. Imagine putting up schools, hospitals, roads, all of that. So the density is one of the least amongst many countries. You can drive for miles without having to see anyone. The advent of technology has actually brought us much closer to population. The need for that is spurred by banking services, schools, registration. So there's a lot that is very natural in the process of awareness creation, yet the government has never relented in actually taking campaigns to services, to villages, to places totally inaccessible by roads, by air, and often these days only accessible through the mobile technology. So much of what has been the culture has actually helped us get to where we are, and it's only a matter of keep pushing that very envelope and bringing the services to people. So it's naturally taken hold.
Thank you. And maybe a quick follow-up question, because you mentioned the social protection systems that exist, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the concrete benefits you have seen for different groups, for women, children, other groups, perhaps in relation to more effectively delivering some of those benefits and services through more integrated systems with civil registration and identity management.
Again, the basis of all of this is the National Development Plan 4, which actually calls for the enactment of e-governance as a service in government. We're not yet there, but there is a serious attempt in making sure that I actually on a dashboard basis can interface with the head of state on any of the services, whether it's sanitation, it's school registration, it's roads, etc. So that basis, it's a project ongoing in my office. This very one, as for, we have traditional communities that really needs to be brought to modern ways of what a woman is in society, the girl child in society. So these kind of protections protect the single mother who is the single parent with registration, and the accruing benefits in terms of deaths of, let's say, the spouse or herself. In some of the cases, women suffer. She may have been in a marital relationship for years, and the husband suddenly dies. Now, traditional practices walks in, and the woman gets returned to wherever she originates without any benefit. But imagine that woman has been plowing the best of her life with that husband in that society, and she suddenly gets deprived. These days, it's very different. So that's a very direct benefit. It's also a very direct benefit to the elderly, because we now know we have a good fair map with the distribution of the elderlies for social protection. Same for foster care, for orphanage children, the vulnerable groups most particularly benefit because there is a database. We can literally go to a database, interrogate that database between the Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Health and Social Services, poverty, and all that. All of these systems are now linked. We are about to conduct the annual, the 10-year population and housing census. This is it's a very big process. We are actually launching the campaign on the 3rd of October, as soon as I go back. Now, all that statistics between the National Planning Statistics Agency, Home Affairs, the Election Commission of Namibia, we are having an election on the 27th of November this year. So all that vital statistics will end up in a coordinated, integrated database, electronic database management system. And the benefits are there for everyone to see. You can't go to a bank and open an account if you're not known who you are, where do you work, did you pay tax, all of that. So the benefits are enormous. And the government is putting enormous efforts to making sure that everyone is registered. We know who you are, what services are accrued to you, what does the government, how many of us are in the country, how many deaths, do you have an ID system, do you have a passport system? All of that is a very direct, sustainable development goal that speaks to Goal 16. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Such a really vivid picture. And congratulations to you for all the work in Namibia. Absolutely. Mr. Rikers, so we'll move on to you now. Can you tell us a bit about why it's been important to take a holistic approach to CRVS and identity management systems in your country, and what have been some of the key ingredients of that approach?
Okay, of course I can. Our history in civil register is, I think, as long as Namibia. We started a civil register in 1811, so that's more than 200 years ago. And soon afterwards, in 1850, we started a continuous population register. So that's also nearly 200 years ago. Of course, in the 200 years, society has changed a lot. And our system of identity changed according to that changes in society. We started with family cards, where the man in the house was responsible for all the people living in the same house. And then almost 100 years later, we changed that to personal cards, where every person was responsible for their own registration, not only the man in the house. And in the 70s, we started the digitization. And in 1st of October 1994, we issued a new law that had a mandatory digitization of the entire population register. So next week, we celebrate the 25th birthday of our fully digitized population register in the Netherlands. but we didn't leave it there. We didn't stop there. A very important addition was a law that made the use of the data in the population register mandatory for all government organizations. All government organizations. So we have a strict once-only principle. Every citizen, if he or she delivered the data to the government, that's the only time she or he has to deliver the data. And then all governments must use that data. They must. And that's really a change in processes. So the tax office must use our data. The statistics office, of course, but I'm glad to do so. Social welfare, social security, healthcare, education, it's all based on the same set of data in our population register. And it's also the basis for, of course, our identity documents and our passports. So we have a truly broad foundational system for our personal data. And at this moment, it's not only personal data. We have what we call a system of base registers. We have the same sort of registers for buildings, for vehicles, for addresses, for income, and they're all interconnected. Every citizen gets a citizen service number, and that citizen service number connects the different registers with each other. So our statistics office actually has a broad view on the total of the Netherlands, all people living in the Netherlands, where they live, what their wages are, on a day-by-day basis. So actually, the true census, where we sent pollsters to all the doors in the Netherlands, 1971 was the last time we did it. And we have a European law that says that we must do a census every 10 years, but we are allowed to do it electronically. So we don't have to send pollsters around. We just, our statistics office gathers all the data they already have, combine them and send them to Europe and say, here's our census. So it's a really strong system, not only personal data, but even vehicle data, building data, to get the overview, the helicopter view that you need to run the country and to base your policy on.
Absolutely. So it sounds like there were the interconnectedness, but also the legislation have been critical in your case as well.
Yeah, legislation is very important, but it's not enough. Just laws is not enough to make people run the system. You got to ensure a quality system, that the data quality is high enough to be used, because we think in feedback loops. If we have data and you must use them, then they must be right. And if they're not right, then you send us a message and we correct them. And then you get the right data and all the others get the right data too. That's just a law and not the best data. That's not enough, because you know the organization will gather the data themselves. We are the Ministry of Interior. Our tax office, Ministry of Finance, is always more important than the Netherlands. If we don't send them the right data, they will come up with something of their own, I'm sure. So we have to deliver the good quality of data, and then the machine keeps running.
And can you give us a quick example, perhaps, of sort of a concrete benefit for a certain group of population?
Yeah. Children. If a child is born, the child benefits from our system from day one. Because on day one, the child is registered. A birth certificate is made, but on the same day, that birth certificate is registered in our population register. A citizen service number is tied to it, and all the organizations that need the data from the child, we send them the data. For instance, the agency that's responsible for the vaccination of the child. Because law says that within 5 working days, the child must have its vaccination. So within 5 days, the child benefits because the child has the vaccination. And that's another feedback loop. If that organization cannot find the child, then something is wrong. And well, that goes on with education, mandatory tuition at the age of 5, and then later on, of course, with the identity cards, the college, the university, the jobs. So it starts at day 1, and it never stops until, well, of course.
The life cycle, yes.
That's the life cycle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so now turning to you, Vicente. So we'd like to hear a little bit about your experience in Ecuador, and to understand why it's been important in your country to take a holistic approach, and what have been some of those key ingredients in your case. What are some of the defining features of the environment in Ecuador?
Thank you very much. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. And thank you I would like to thank, first of all, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and also the Center of Excellence for CRV system for convening this event, and also to the United Nations for hosting us today. I'm pleased to be here on behalf of the government of Ecuador to share our experience regarding to this target that is very important for us, as target 16 from the SDGs. So, a comprehensive approach to the management of the CRVs and identity management is very important for the Idrc. What is the Idrc? It's our institution, the Civil Registry from Ecuador, because it has allowed to guarantee access to the universal and constitutional rights to all citizens that have an identity from the moment they are born. The same happens with other vital records throughout the person's life cycles, such as death, marriage, and also de facto unions that are registered according to the identity that every citizen has. The Idrc, our institution, the Civil Registry, manage the civil registration information system in an integrated way to the identity management system. Identity documents, and this is very important for us, that identity documents are not issued without a prior or an exhaustive validation of civil acts, records, and also, for example, birth, marriage, or others. The key ingredients that you ask, we have in Ecuador 3 basic elements that integrates this holistic approach to CRVs and identity management. The first one is the reconfiguration of our legal framework with the national constitution that guarantees the right to a personal and collective identity, which includes having a duly and registered and freely chosen name and surname, as well as the material and immaterial characteristics that derive from identity, as well as the ratification of all human rights instruments regarding to this. Secondly, we have a renewed organic law on management of identity and civil data, which confirms that the Ecuadorian state, throughout its institution, with our institution, will guarantee to all Ecuadorians and also to our foreigners, regardless of their immigration status, their right to identity and protection of their personal information. And finally, this just happened last week on September 19, the Ministry of Telecommunications presented a draft law on data protection to the National Assembly of Ecuador, with the objective of guaranteeing the rights of all the citizens against the processing of their personal data. This is very important. Also, a consequence of this legal framework that we have in our country on the right to identity, the state institutions work holistically, so this legally managed and recognized right has an invaluable value that guarantees access to exercise civil, political, economic, and cultural rights to all the citizens of Ecuador, and as well, and for me this is the key issue, the access of public services, that is very important. And this has allowed the implementation of civil registration and identity services based on improved and simplified processes that, with the support of modern computer systems, likewise the states need we need to have timely and reliable information by other entities, for example, health institution, education institution, social security, and others. to implement effective policies that contributes to improving the comprehensive approach to civil registration and also identity management.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm very glad that you highlighted the data protection law as well. I know that that certainly is a really critical issue, and we talk a lot about the right to be counted, but we need to balance that with the right to privacy, of course. And so, can you tell us just briefly one example from Ecuador of the benefits that come from having these integrated systems for people?
Well, for example, we have in Ecuador two examples. For example, civil registry is the core of the institution. For example, birth, marriage, including LGBTI citizens, de facto unions, gender, and death changes are recorded. And the civil registry service operates nationwide through fixed, mobile, and itinerant service posts, face-to-face, and also virtual channels. We have virtual channels available in Ecuador. And in the international level, we give the same rights, or we have the same services that are provided throughout the consulates that have the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the civil registration services are performed through the Unified System of Civil Registration and Identification. We call in Ecuador SURI. That's our system, which is a web application that works across agencies and centralizes the records in a single database. And also, what we have with the new ones, we have in a special system in the hospitals that at the same time, the registration of live births is carried out directly in public and private hospitals in the country through a web system that it's called Revit, that's implemented by the civil registry in our country. And that system, it's like the doctors enter the live birth data, after which the system automatically assigns a unique identity number. And then, finally, the doctor certifies the birth through an electronic signature and in a single automated process. So the records of live births are automatically consulted by our institution and the other public entities for the implementation of different programs or processes according to the field of action. So, for example, we work together with the INEC, that is the institution that have all the statistics and data in our country, and they have all the systems are integrated. So when we have a new word, all the institutions have the same data. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So. Such great examples, and I was actually very heartened to hear the minister also speak to the relationship and the effects for gender empowerment, particularly for women whose spouse dies, etc. And I want to acknowledge that the Center of Excellence is doing some work on CRVS and gender. There are some materials at your seats about that as well, and our dear colleagues at Open Data Watch who are deeply involved in that. So. I'd like to open the floor for questions now. We have about 10 minutes. This is, I know from the confirmation list, a room with very deep expertise and knowledge. So I'm eager to take some questions for the panelists. We have some microphones if you would like to raise your hands. Sure, the minister. Yep, from Zambia, please.
Thank you so much, and I must thank the panel for the in-depth of the information that they've shared with us. I've got just one for the Honorable Minister, Economic Planning from Namibia. Indeed, civil registration is a way of identifying who we are. And I would want to find out from you, if we look back to the history of our continent, prior to some of our countries getting independent. And I'm speaking because to those of you who might not know, the Republic of Namibia and Zambia have got such a common history. We hosted our brothers and sisters prior to independence. And during that time, we had children that were born in Zambia, and a number of them How are you ensuring, and I know these are things that we shall be discussing in Lusaka, that the records of those children who could have been born in exile and then get back to Namibia, for example, after independence, how are we able to, for you to verify some of the details? I know that some of the children were born in health facilities, others probably in the camps, liberation camps. Do you have a deliberate verification system for that category of children? Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take a few more questions for the panel so that we can group them. I see Pin on that end, and then we'll go to this end. So are we only one mic? Okay. Sorry. Logistically.
Hi there, Harpinder Collicott from Development Initiatives. I'm interested to hear from the panel a little bit more information on death registration as well, and death statistics, because obviously birth registration is lacking, but death registration is critical if we're looking at the SDGs, particularly on child mortality, maternal mortality. So I'd love to hear from the panel a little bit more with regards to how progress is being made on death registration, especially deaths that don't occur within hospitals and other public locations such as that, but rural monitoring of those deaths as well.
Thank you. And we do have one. Do we have
Hi. For the panel, I'm wondering, registration, national registration is fundamentally an act of trust between the government and between the citizenry. How are each of the governments looking to ensure that trust is maintained, and specifically with regard to the security of the data and prevention of the misuse of that data?
Thank you. Excellent questions. We could take maybe one more if there is. And if not, that's great because I have one. So I would love to hear from each of the panelists. Excuse me. If you have a word of advice for individuals in your same position in other countries about the pathway to strengthening civil registration and vital statistics systems and integrating them with identity management systems, what would be the advice that you have for other countries who are developing their own systems? So in addition to that question, we have the question to the minister about children born in exile, as well as a great question about death registration and trust in data. Thank you.
Thank you. As for the children born in various destinations, we have a strong history of children born in Germany, the then East Germany, sorry. Children born in the Republic of Cuba, children born in Angola, and more particularly children born in Zambia, Lusaka. And as you know, Comrade Minister, you remember that Namibia had a United Nations institution, UNIN, where the exile colleagues and the exile government was prepared for the day in government by the United Nations. All of that capacity is the machinery we see in government today. So Zambia played a critical role. As for the registration of all of these kids, they have successfully been integrated into the registration system in Namibia. Not that there were special effort put in place. The Ministry of Home Affairs and Immigration was a setup already before that transition from the then South African apartheid system, which had registration mechanisms and capacities in place back then. We have improved on that by going e-governance on that issue. So as of now, as we speak, we have none of these others except for those born in exile who chose to retain their citizenship. So between the two, there is seamless transitioning. So we had simply successfully transformed, and we have very few issues insofar as that is concerned. Our challenge lies in the pockets where we have no access to in terms of death. I'll tell you a very nasty event. In 2014, 2015, I was campaigning for local and regional elections. And part of the northwest part of the country is totally inaccessible. It's a very large piece of land, mountainous. That's where the nomadic Himba people actually locate. And as I was traveling around in the village, I came across two gentlemen on donkeys with a body. Trying overnight, the death happened. No mortuaries, no health facilities, no access roads. The best they could do is to challenge 150 kilos to the nearest clinic. And all that was on the back of two donkeys, side by side with a makeshift sort of bed, and the body was actually suspended between the two donkeys. And it's a treacherous part of the road, maintenance and everything else. This was disheartening. And those are the pockets that really are challenging to us. But by and large, the system is so well known, and its citizens, there are death certificates issued. Because our societies are very traditional still to a large extent, death is a big issue, and people will lodge in. You can't get leave saying that you are going for a burial without a death certificate. You just can't get it. So work is so concerned because it's very regular an excuse that I would not pitch for Monday because I was at a funeral somewhere in an inaccessible place. Yet you get paid. So your employer will not give you that leave approval without showing a death certificate. So it is that rudimentary. It is that understood. But yet the challenges are where we have no services available, we still need to do more. I am sure we're getting there because I actually can pay my farm laborer from New York. I've done it. It's month end by Friday, and I would be able to pay him directly to his bank account. So that's something that we can do. I speak to my wife who's in Zimbabwe now. My child is in Swaziland, and the other one is back home. We have a conference call. So this is where Namibia has actually connected up to. We have the capability to get there. It's a matter of link the various systems, iron out the bottlenecks, breed the capacity, create the quality, and making sure that I can dashboard anyone from the desk of my office about a death in the Northeast. Those are the grounds we need to cover. If it's done in banking, it certainly can be done in population registration.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Remind me of the two other questions, if I can deal with.
Well, I had asked for your advice to other countries, but I feel like you did
Okay.
that. We heard a lot of
Insofar
advice.
as the advice is concerned, those of you, Namibia, South Africa, Botswana, I'm not so sure about my friends from Zambia. We are amongst the first countries that have actually proliferated social protection services. We pay old age grants, disability grants, orphanage grants, etc., etc., etc. And what this has done, it's created a sub-economy that is in the regions. Regions are no longer starved of the regular cash injection through all of these grants. So if you have not started, you are leaving a large population, and most vulnerable, you are leaving them out. So start already. The journey is never going to be easy. It's going to be treacherous. It'll cost you money. In the process, it may break down and it seems as if nothing comes of it. In the end, the benefits are enormous to the economy.
Thank you. Bravo. I want to make sure we have time to hear from Franz and Vicente. Final thoughts on the two questions, please. Franz.
Okay, there was the question about the death registration. Well, actually in the Netherlands it's kind of similar to the birth registration. We can pretty much say that everyone who dies is registered. We have a very strict law on what you must do and what you can do when somebody dies. Very strict laws. And there's always a medical practitioner involved, so that leaves not much room for anyone to decide on their own what to do. So that's not really an issue in the Netherlands. I think for the question of trust, I think the answer for the trust is transparency, and GDPR does a lot of good things for building trust. I think we must work on a level information position between the citizens and governments. Sometimes we as a government forget that there are citizens. We are so busy working on behalf of the citizen that we forget to inform the citizen. When something goes wrong, then you lose trust, and it's very hard to get it back. So while you're doing it good, inform the other. So we have a very big My Government portal where you can, as a citizen, you can log in and look at all the information the government has from you, and that's the information they use in the process. So you can always know what were the data, what were the decisions, what were the laws. So it's explain, and be transparent. I think that's the best solution to trust questions. Always be transparent. Well, and my advice would be, well, it's difficult advice. I think a situation like this where you can learn from other countries and other solutions are really great. So I love the idea of the compendium, and it has got more good practices than one. So you have something to choose from. So read it, talk to other countries, what they do, and then make your own decision. Please make your own decision. The registration is not a goal in itself. You register data to use them. So look in your own country, what is needed, what do we use, and what do we need for our processes, and then, well, look in the compendium and see what fits best. I think that's the best advice.
Thank you. Great message. So Vicente and my colleague Alonso may help with some translation.
You hear me? This one. Thank you. Well, I will switch it into in Spanish in order to express better myself, and thank you, Alonso. I appreciate your help. Well, let's get started with the first question regarding to death. Realmente en Ecuador lo que nosotros estamos haciendo en este momento es hacer una actualización y una digitalización de las actas de defunciones.
So in Ecuador, what we're doing at the moment is we're actualizing records and digitalizing them.
Nosotros somos la primera institución del Ecuador. Estamos próximos a cumplir más de 100 años de aniversario, y para nosotros obviamente tenemos hechos y actos civiles y registros muy antiguos, de los cuales estamos en este momento haciendo una digitalización, y tenemos un proyecto y un grupo de personas específicamente solamente trabajando en la actualización y el registro de estos datos.
So we're taking into account historical data, and we actually have a group of people who are putting everything into computers and into the system, so we have a better use of it.
Y esta actualización, it's a daily actualization. With the second question from the transparency, Una de las respuestas sería el tema de que acabamos de presentar la ley para la protección de datos. Creo que eso es algo sumamente importante. Y estamos nosotros como institución en constantes campañas. Utilizamos para saber lo que está permitido y difundir lo que está en la ley. Es importante que el ciudadano sepa, como decía el colega, lo que se puede hacer y lo que no.
So for us, it's about this new law that we proposed, this law to protect data, and we are constantly talking to our citizens to let them know what are their rights, what are the capacities, what are the services that our office is providing for them.
Sí, y obviamente para nosotros la transparencia, como decía Frank, la transparencia es realmente la confianza y es importante que las instituciones del Estado podamos transmitir esa confianza a nuestros ciudadanos.
So how we're building trust is to be transparent. This is really very important for us, and our credibility relies on that. So we actively engage with our citizens to build that trust every day.
Bien, y finalmente, the advice. Bueno, creo que lo más importante es poder sentirlo en el corazón y que de verdad, y que nos podamos dar cuenta de la importancia que tenemos en nuestras manos, los registros civiles, de poder registrar los hechos y actos civiles de los ciudadanos. Nosotros somos la puerta para el acceso a derechos, para el acceso a educación, salud y todos los servicios sociales.
So thank you for everything. Just to wrap up, I'd like to say that my advice is about this, that this is really important work. We really deeply are committed to it, and it's because in our hands we have the most important facts and moments within a person's lives, and we think these are the pathways for rights and for public services such as health and educational ones.
Es importante que tomemos conciencia y podamos acercar los servicios a la ciudadanía. En todos los países sabemos que hay poblaciones vulnerables que son de muy difícil acceso y que no tenemos instituciones del registro civil en estos sitios. ¿Qué hace el gobierno del Ecuador? Tenemos un plan que se llama el Plan Toda una Vida, que cuida al ciudadano desde que nace hasta que muere. Y tenemos varios programas y misiones que se dedican a cada uno de estos grupos. ¿Qué hacemos en los lugares donde no tienen acceso? Es importante que cambiemos la visión, y ese sería mi consejo, cambiar la visión de ese estado estático que está esperando que el ciudadano venga a registrarse. Eso no sucede en todos lados. Hay poblaciones en las que no podemos acceder. ¿Y qué tiene que hacer el Estado? Irlos a buscar. We have to find them. We have to get the office where they are. Tenemos que ir hacia donde están ellos y cambiar esta visión del estado estático, sino que estamos moviéndonos hacia donde está la necesidad. Esa es nuestra responsabilidad y por eso estamos donde estamos y tenemos que asumir la responsabilidad de que, y repito, porque es sumamente importante, que lo sintamos en el corazón, lo pasemos a la cabeza y lo hagamos en acciones, porque el Estado, ese es el compromiso de los Estados, hacer acciones para poder alcanzar el objetivo, no solamente en nuestros países, sino en todos.
So the approach we're taking in Ecuador is from being a static state, at a static office, we are becoming much more dynamic. We're actually trying to reach every citizen. So we have records for those citizens that we can actually approach from birth to death. However, there are pockets of people that we are not aware of these situations. And the way we're changing that is from going from static to dynamic. And really, as I said again, taking this as a really important task. So because that's the only way we can ensure that our citizens have rights.
We have it in our hands. We have to do it. We have to take. It's fun. It's really nice to talk about this. I mean, not only words. We have to take it to actions. And if we don't have the data and the registration, we can't make public policy. And if we don't make public policy, I don't know why we are here. Thank you very much.
Well, we had already a very fantastic
We already had a very fantastic first panel, and I think we can match, if not even do more with this panel. So thank you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Here we go.
Great. We have, it's my pleasure to be here. My name is Muntasir Kamal. I'm the program leader from IDRC for the program of maternal and child health. And it's my pleasure and honor to be here in this fantastic event in collaboration with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. We heard in the previous panel about country experiences, but what we want to hear from this panel is really about the experience of organizations. How can organizations and networks at the regional and global level support the work on CRVS and identity management? This is very important. Countries need to be supported. Countries need information, as well as, of course, they have lessons to share with other countries, and there needs to be fora where this can happen. And to do this with us this afternoon, we have distinguished guests. First, on my left is my notes. Honorable Stephen Kampiongo, who is an MP and Minister of Home Affairs from Zambia, and next to him is Francesca Spatu-Lizano, who is the Assistant Secretary General for Policy Coordination and Interagency Affairs, UN Department of Economics and Social Affairs. On the far left is Mahmoud Mohideen, Senior Vice President for the 2030 Agenda and UN Affairs at the World Bank.
This is not my political position.
This is, and it's an honor to have you all here. And maybe I'll just start with my left. We heard already from the first panel about the Conference of Ministers coming up next month. African ministers responsible for CRVS. Not everyone in the room knows about the conference and about this and the history of the conference. And maybe if you could share with us about the conference and what you're hoping to achieve with the ministers at that conference.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. And I also want to commend the previous panel for the information they have shared with us. The same vein, I would like to thank the conveners of this interactive forum, which I find very informative. Yes, indeed, we, as Zambia, will be hosting the 5th conference of ministers responsible for civil registration and vital statistics. This is a biannual conference which we have been holding on the continent of Africa. And this year's theme, I would like to quote, is Innovative Civil Registration and Vital Statistics System, Foundation for Legal Identity Management. Very timely indeed. And why this theme? It must be known that despite the success story that we heard from the Honorable and comrade and brother from Namibia, where the systems are all in place, digitized, there are still other AU member states who are still using manual processes as a way of registering vital events. And we know that the main goal of civil registration is for each country to ensure that vital events, all vital events, are recorded as and when they happen. And you heard from the Honorable Minister through his interesting story that there are geographical challenges. There are geographical areas that cannot be covered by civil registration. And therefore, how do we get vital statistics, which is basically capturing of characteristics of vital events? So this theme for us is basically saying, let's have a revolutionary journey as AU member states of ensuring that we embrace innovation by introducing appropriate information technology systems as a reliable way of vital civil registration. This doesn't come easily. It comes at a cost. And as you know, member states have got different capacities. So this conference, we are saying we are all going to walk the same journey as AU member states. You heard me posing a question to the Honorable Minister from Namibia, because we have these interesting national connections as AU member states. So how do we then have systems that can speak to each other? Home Affairs Namibia getting to look at the data in Zambia and verify some of the data that they would want. So we are saying we are going to walk the same journey, and through innovation and by embracing technology as a way of ensuring that civil registration is strengthened and enhanced. Vital statistics. You heard the examples that we got from Ecuador. How often do we get to do census, for example? 10-year period. How much can we utilize this data in terms of planning, policy, as policymakers? 10 years. Other than census, you have got sample surveys. These sample surveys, which are done periodically. And of course, they have got, marginal errors that come with them. So how do we interlink to make sure that the innovations that we are going to embrace are able to help us do things differently? As you know, you can't achieve different results by doing one and the same thing. We want to bridge the gap that we have identified in terms of identity, because the current systems that we have not addressed and have not helped member states to realize the main goal, like I said, of civil registration. So this is why we came up with this theme. And the main objective, of course, as policymakers, as ministers, we are policymakers, is to ensure that we provide strategic and policy direction towards a holistic, innovative, and integrated civil registration system and digital identity management, which will then help us, contribute to the realization of, we heard about SDGs and as a way of going forward. Of course, we have got some specific objectives. In addition to the main objective, we are saying identifying key challenges in the implementation of CRVS on the region and at national level. You had a classic case of what the minister was talking about. A death that occurs in a rural part. How are we able to do verbal autopsy, for example, to know the causes of death and record them? The births that occur in extreme rural parts of our countries where there are no health facilities. How are we able to have village registers, for example, where when birth occurs, it is registered on the actual day? And when we say holistic approach, is to ensure that no sector is left behind. You heard the benefits that were shared with us. How does a child get to enter education system at an appropriate age and then be able to enjoy the rights for children? There are children that are born in some of these remotest parts, not registered anywhere. They get to die, and nothing is recorded about them. Scandal of Invisibility. So, yes, we have got countries that have made tremendous progress, but we still have got these challenges. And when we meet as a conference, we have to share these challenges and then propose solutions. So there are a number of objectives. The other one also is to review how much progress we have made in terms of what we have been doing the past 5 conferences that we have had, the past 4 conferences that we have had, and also chart the way forward and ensure that we are all moving together in addressing some of these challenges. Next week, we shall be meeting in Geneva. I was just chatting with the Commissioner for Refugees. One of the challenges that we have also had is issue of statelessness. How can we address statelessness using civil registration? Because we have people that have been uprooted from their home countries, end up in other countries where legal frameworks cannot allow them to be identified and registered. We shall be reviewing how much we are doing in terms of implementing the 10-year action plan, which was launched by Mr. Kuteles when he was Commissioner for Refugees in 2014, which runs up to 2024, to end statelessness. So how do we then relate the civil registration, which is enhanced, to ending such evils, which are just an affront to human rights? And so this is what we are gathering to discuss as ministers responsible for civil registration on the continent of Africa.
So, Minister, I'm going to follow up with a question. One of the things that came out of the microphone is not working.
Okay.
It is? Okay, great. One of the things that came out of the compendium, one of the lessons learned, is the importance of political will for all of this to happen. Can you comment how has the political will changed over the course of these conferences, and can we now say there is a consensus in African governments that there is a political will to establish and strengthen and build holistic CRVS systems?
Thank you very much. Indeed, like I did say, some of these paradigm shift I'm talking about, of changing the way we have done things, require serious political commitment, because you cannot get resources to be invested in the area of civil registration if there's no political will. And for us, sitting here is a classic example of how we are taking these issues of civil registration and vital statistics seriously, because indeed you can't plan for that which you can't measure. And for all of us who are policymakers, have got a concern that you can only make informed policies when you are able to get correct, accurate, and verifiable data. And that can only come from enhancing and strengthening civil registration systems, and also changing the ways of how we collect, analyze the characteristics that relate to vital events, which is vital statistics. And so this conference provides a platform to show political commitment at that level. And I've been privileged, I think, to attend the previous 2 conferences. I just missed one. The first one I attended was in Durban, which was graced by President Zuma and chaired by Madam Nkosazana Zuma as Minister of Foreign Affairs then. So from there we resolved that we were not going to just be a talk show where ministers meet, chat, and that's it. We want to make sure that when resolutions are made, we make follow-ups and see where we are. Like someone said, implementation is very key, and it requires serious commitment in order to implement this paradigm shift.
Thank you very much. We'll hold you to that. Francesca, I'll go now to you. We have, since I think last year, there's a one UN legal management kind of approach. And also we heard from the compendium, from the lessons learned from the compendium, the importance of a holistic approach at the country level, but that also translates at the global level as well, having a holistic approach. So can you please tell us a little bit about the UN approach to be having a holistic, or the design of having a holistic approach from the UN system, please?
Thank you very much. I have to say, first of all, I would like to take up again the words of the minister, the scandal of invisibility. This is really a scandal because think of going throughout life without a legal identity. Even to get in this building, you have to show an ID of some sort. Think of coming inside without an ID. Impossible. And think how many other impossible things there are for those who don't have that ID, that legal identity. So we believe really it's important, is essential, and it is now, and as UN system, we would like to not only put our acts together, but lead the effort. And to do so, indeed, we would like to have everybody gathering around this legal identity agenda. We believe, as you said, in a holistic approach, as the minister also said, a holistic approach to civil registration, vital statistics, and identity management. This should be the result, indeed, of a choice of government, because governments have to provide the services to their citizens, have to open access to all set of possibilities which exist, and enabling citizens to take advantage of those goes through having the right registration, a continuous system, a complete system. And as the minister said, also having the right data and making decisions about priorities is essential, based on facts, on knowledge of where your citizens are, what they need, where the gaps are. That allows you to make choices which are meaningful. So how can we help? Definitely the UN, since its inception, urged member states to establish a civil registration that will translate into vital statistics and provide, therefore, this critical information about size, structure, and dynamics of population. And then, over the years, we made a number, as UN, a number of recommendations, issued international standards, and those translated already in a set of progress, tangible progress, towards universal registration of vital events. We have done this in cooperation with, of course, other parts of the UN family. DESA is at the basis of this, but it's not alone, far from that. We have a few examples, countries like Namibia, indeed, South Africa, and more recently Kenya, Ethiopia we are working with. And then recently an additional aspect came. We live in a modern era, and so there is this aspect of biometric characteristics, which is also very relevant. So apart from the birth to death process, there is this new way to account for people and their characteristic, and so the focus was on the issuance of legal identity credentials, which contain these kind of elements, fingerprints, iris scan, photograph, etc., for the adult population of a country. And this prompted the establishment of the UN Legal Identity Expert Group, which was launched in September 2018 by the Deputy Secretary General and is co-chaired by the Department of Economic and Social Affairs with UNDP and UNICEF. And we developed this One UN strategy, indeed, ensuring legal identity for all. And therefore, we think we really can help, and we are here to help establish all sorts of systems in the countries who are willing and ready. And also, I would like to mention here the new resident coordinator network, which is crucial, of course, to be going towards implementation of all these plans and strategies. So we work with them and through them, and we are firmly committed to this kind of advances. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think this gives us a lot of hope for sort of having this layered on top of countries' holistic approach at the country level. But maybe I'll just I'll take a follow-up question or give a follow-up question on that, which is, of course, we're all accountable, or all countries are accountable to report on the SDGs. So how is this sort of approach, do you think, in your vision, how is this going to be concretely linked to and helps the advancement of the achievement of the SDGs?
Well, thank you. This is really important to make this linkage. We spoke about the individual, the need for individuals to have this kind of basis to, have their rights recognized or claim their rights. But certainly in a more global way, SDGs, many of the SDGs rely on the need to know, need to have data about population. And I think that we can say, I have here the figure, that something like more than 60 SDG indicators are based on population data in this kind of registry. So it's a fundamental link that we need to have between SDGs and the data. And also, I would say, since we know that in half of the countries this system are not really functioning fully, there is a lot of work to do. And we need to measure, to be accountable, as we said before, and that's a starting point which cannot be missed.
That's great. Thanks very much for your passion about this. I think also just maybe add that we know also, or has been reported, about 38 of the 50-some indicators on gender-related indicators on the SDGs can be covered from information coming from, or data coming from CRVS systems. So with that, I'll go to our final speaker to speak to us from mostly from an economics perspective, or from a financing perspective. One of the things that also came out from the compendium, one of the lessons learned, is that those systems cost money. They're not necessarily cheap. They're efficient, they're effective when they're well established and well used, but those things cost money. We know in some countries it costs, in Guinea-Conakry, it costs $160 on average for a person to report a death, for example, to get a death certificate. So their financing is an important at the individual level, at the country level. So from a World Bank perspective, how is, what are the initiatives you have? What is the approach of the bank to linking the ID management with CRVS systems? Maybe start with that one.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. Well, that's a very big question, and for it, I'm prepared with a nice 6-page statement. If you are missing statements, I can read the talking points as reflected. I have them here. No, just to make it easy for you and me, that will be on our website as suggested, talking points prepared, and then what I'm going to say is going to be completely different. Let me get before the economics and the finance on the simple stories here, because this is an issue that is taken very seriously by the World Bank to fight poverty. We consider it as an important pillar to achieve an important goal, SDG 16, and through that to get the Sustainable Development Goals. But go, please, and explain that to a fellow villager back home in Egypt. Why should you have an ID? In order to achieve the SDGs. Good luck with the conversation. And they are polite, so that will not really be ending badly. But I think, and that came actually from a case that I had. I was listening to the president of Estonia, and I was impressed with what they said. And I think they established a very good benchmark, and I'm happy with the emphasis of this panel and the previous panel on learning from each other. So I flew from Prague, where I met the Estonian president, and he was happy with his unique identification system and all of that. And I chatted with my fellow villagers about that. So I think we need to start before the issues of isolation and repression and getting people outside the system. What is happening really at the individual level? Why they should really consider to play game and to get the right incentives for them to be part of the system. So if they realize the benefits of being there, known and recorded upon birth, and then in a couple of days and couple of months, their children are going to be subject to good care of the of the society and the government and the local authority through health services, immunization. And then a couple of years after that, they are going to be admitted to schools and they are going to be registered properly. Now we are experimenting something that I learned from the Netherlands about how to encourage children to save. And I'm proposing that with the Union of Arab Banks in a special meeting at the margins of the annual meetings in few days. So at the age of 6, you can really now, because of the very low transaction cost, thanks to the digitalization, you can register the child and you can really put a small amount of money, part of the reserve requirements of the banks, without getting it very complicated. But there are reserve requirements that could really be used for this kind of purpose. And then every person, regardless their income, they can really be subject to something equivalent, in the case of an average Arab country, to $100 to around $300 for each child. And then if you are poor, you are not going to be adding anything to that, but interest will be accumulated until you have the legal age. If your family is more affluent than being poor, they can really add to this. So these kind of individual incentives are very much important for the family to realize. Now we're seeing the world, thanks to Mexico and Brazil, had taught us how to provide conditional cash transfers. So the in-kind subsidy system is becoming a cash-based system, and this new system is becoming digitalized. So if you are not registered, you don't exist in that kind of system. So that needs to be put in a bigger context than just talking about the matter as if it's a common sense and everybody should be wearing the nice, colorful SDGs. They need really to see really what's in it for them when they be part of the system. And in that case, you will find them relaxing many issues of concern, including the transaction cost perhaps to go to register, including perhaps to relax much more complicated matters, coming from a village again, traditions, culture. I know many people, they didn't really even think to register their kids born until they are at the age of 2 or 3, for many reasons. To make sure that with the willingness of God, that they are going to be alive. Second, because of fear of envy. All of these kind of things. You need really more than the World Bank to work on that, and that's, I'm happy always to work in partnership with those who know matters related to society, sociology, cultural issues, and to communicate better at the local level. And because I'm to some extent, I'm fed up actually with the call for that no size fits all, for 2 reasons. First, because some common sense approaches could be applied everywhere if you are going to adapt them nicely and not to use them to resist change. This is one thing. Second, if you are going to be doing matters country-based, I can tell you, and you happen to come from the same country, if you just cross half a mile to the north or the south from a village, you will find the cultures are completely different. And that happens not just in Egypt, many of the African countries. So this is the start. How to solve it? There is a $1 billion for almost 1 billion cases of non-registered people around the world. Not enough to imagine $1 for each to get them registered. But the $1 billion is the budget for the ID4D program that we have, Identification for Development, that we are doing now in partnership with the UN, the CEO of the World Bank, and the DSG, Amir Mohammed, co-chaired this big initiative. And we have operations in more than 35 countries. We provide technical assistance, sometimes not very interesting, but this is the starting point of engagement. Then we get into the advisory work for policy and institutional building. And then, when it always counts, the issue of money. There are funds of around $1 billion that are going to be scaled up, and then my memory will not really get me to tell you who are the partners, because they are providing some interesting support. Some of them of the funds are associated with, as always, with the Gates Foundation. But we have other, of all of these new good ideas, we have this kind of support from them, including in the financial inclusion. And yesterday I was with Queen Maxima, not me, just with thousands of people, and I have a picture with her, actually, to prove this. But she was speaking yesterday on financial inclusion. You cannot do financial inclusion without digital transformation today. But Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Australian government, UK government, and the Idrc network are all partnering with us, with UN partners. So it's very inclusive as far as the partners and their contribution. So if you have a technical issue, advisory matter, or funding. If you have the ideas, you can really apply to the ID4D, and the website is there, and our country teams in 135 countries are willing to help. And we started to get from these 35 countries variety of things, from establishing a system to renewing a new system to make it more digitalized. GDPR compatible systems are being developed, so are part of that. Security for retrieving the data and storage of the data are part of that. And matters related to, which is very new to us, communication. It's not enough just to say it's common sense, everybody is doing it. Zimbabwe, Namibia, South Africa, Holland, all of those good people who have been doing work, we need really to explain why they are doing it. What are the benefits? From the individual to the district to the country at large, and then we can really say, well, as a result of that, SDG 16 in one of its items are being fulfilled, but we need to put that in an overall context. You cannot really have it isolated from the rest of the efforts required in order to put us on track to achieve the SDGs. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your comprehensive answer. I think the point you've raised many important points, but I think I'll just add to it the importance of really making the economic case for the government. You know, so yes, it is a question of rights. Yes, it is a question of access. It is a question of having holistic and sound policy, but it's also a question of what is affordable, what's cost effective, and that might change from, might be different between different countries.
I totally agree. Traditionally, for many countries, without mentioning any, because what I'm going to say now is not really nice, it's coming from security, Orwellian kind of perspective, that you need really to cover all things, to put rules, controls, who goes there, who listens to that. This is the kind of an approach. And it has many fans and it goes on well with that, but it has its own limitation. But the economic case, the social case, the rights case will get others to be part of this. The political leadership is required, but political leadership is not just about the head of state and the honorable ministers as we saw them there. It's basically the ability for them to communicate, for everybody to be a leader on her and his household to make the change.
You said it better than me, so thank you very much.
No, you said it first, so I learned from you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I'll open the floor for a couple of quick questions. The time is tight, but I know probably some of you are eager to have time for questions, so we'll open the floor for a couple of questions. I have a question here.
Thank you. My name is James, and I come from Vital Strategies, part of the Data for Health initiative. This is very exciting what you share with us, especially Mahmoud. And speaking of countries and going down to the common man and the public that you just referred to, there is two very diverse movements growing that we see. One is the CRVS, and the other is the ID. And here we are talking about legal identity. What I didn't hear is, how do countries envision building the bridges? And this goes to my Zambian colleagues and probably to you as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the brief question to the point. Any other questions? One more, quickly. Okay, quick and brief, please.
Sure. I'm Claire Brolin from the Centre for Policy Futures from the University of Queensland. I very much push and promote rights-based approaches to CRVS system strengthening overtly, so it's been very heartening to hear the word rights in this room today. On that vein, I'm wondering what you're aware of is happening in terms of increasing participatory governance in CRVS system strengthening, because there's a real bi-directional relationship in terms of including communities in the governance of CRVS systems and awareness raising and consciousness raising. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll give very quick remarks from the speakers and start maybe from the right side. Please go ahead.
Right. I'll try to react to your comment about this issue of engagements with variety of stakeholders. And I'd like to refer everybody to a very important piece that came up from an international macroeconomist, so had nothing really directly to do with what you are saying now. Raghu Rajan, the former head of the Bank of India and former chief economist of the IMF. He has an interesting book by the title of The Missing Pillar or The Third Pillar. We keep talking about role of government and leadership. We keep talking as well about private sector solutions because many of these systems are going to be developed by private sector. But the missing pillar is basically what you mentioned now. The role of community, the role of society, and this goes beyond NGOs and CSOs. NGOs, they have very important role, but they are focused in some particular matters. CSOs will come with different size and shapes, and they have their own objectives. But to engage the society and the community at large, it's much more complicated system, especially when it gets to this kind of engagement. There are rules and protocols and operations. He's a macroeconomist, so he has to get things together in order to reach what we all hope for, inclusive growth. We assume that if you get inclusive growth right, we can reach sustainable development, at least from the economic perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francesca.
Yeah, on this issue of the rights-based approach, I think that's fundamental indeed to convince those who might not feel comfortable with all these systems of registration, because this is what it is for, is to claim your right to be able to access further social services, to be recognized as, in the case of gender, a owner of your land or inheritance rights and this kind of things, the ability to, move around freely and not under the tutel of somebody else, and so on and so forth. So being recognized as an individual with all the rights which go with it, I think it's fundamental, and it's a very approach we would like to see, acknowledged as the reason why we do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Final word.
Thank you so much. My final words, first of all, to pick up from what James was saying, talking about legal identity. I think my distinguished lady sitting next to me gave a classic example of how it has been taking to access this place. I mean, if you have got no ID. And that gives you a classic example of what we're dealing with. How do we get someone identified from birth? Up to the time they go through the education system, and become an adult. What do they become? Who are they? We also looking at making sure that we look at all the aspects. Migration. How are we looking after these people that are moving places on the African continent from one country to another and beyond the continent? How are we looking at the people of concern? The people who have been uprooted from their countries not by will, but they've found themselves in these circumstances where they are under threat of statelessness. How do we legitimize their status so that they become legitimate citizens of whatever country they would be? So there's so many questions that we need to address by ensuring that we strengthen these systems. And we have got no choice, unfortunately, because time is ticking. And like my brother was saying, from Namibia, was urging all of us to ensure that we provide social safety net protection to the need. Who are they? How many are they? Where are they? These are pertinent questions, and that goes into the economic issues that my dear colleague was raising. So in conclusion, those who are coming to Lusaka, we shall share a little bit more. I can only welcome you to Lusaka, Zambia. And I want to thank the AU agencies that have been facilitating the hosting of this conference, the UN agencies that have been on board in supporting the Zambian government to host a successful conference. We are very grateful. And so you are welcome to Lusaka next month, and we shall interact a little bit more and see how you can take us to task as policymakers, as decision makers, what are we doing in terms of implementing some of these resolutions that are tailored to ensure enhanced civil registration. I thank you.
And at this welcoming invitation, we end this panel. Thank you so much for our panelists. Thank you all for your engagement. Thank you very much. So now we move to the closing remarks, which will be given by Stefan Schweinfest, who is the Director for UN Statistics Division at the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Thank you very much.
Magic button. Yeah, if you speak early in such an event, you stand between the people and the lunch, and if you speak late, you stand between the people and the exit. I don't know which one is worse. So I promise you I won't keep you for long. When I told colleagues that I'm going for a CRVS lunch, they were a little bit worried about whether this was good for my health. And Arjan at the beginning said, this could become dangerously technical, but it wasn't technical for very long, because when our colleagues talked about the stories in Africa, in Namibia, and challenged us, and Vicente said, this is a question of the heart. And our colleague from Namibia said, if you can move money around, can we use digital means to help people? I think it became very, very clear that this is not a technical topic. So we know the problem is really clear, led us into the situation in Africa. Half of the children born are not properly registered. And so there is an underinvestment, but there is also hope. I think that what we can take away from this meeting. I mean, there are digital opportunities. The actors are all aligned. I think we have the political commitment. We have the commitment from big important partners like the World Bank to help with the funding and the financing. And I think the UN system has aligned itself behind this UN legal identity agenda very firmly. And we all understand it has to be done in a holistic approach. I'm a statistician, I say always, we do not take pictures. We do not just capture a moment and produce data. We actually make a movie. We produce information time and time and time again, because what we really want to measure is development. So, I mean, we need to look at the long term. We need to anchor identity systems which are phenomenal and give us many opportunities to help people, to give them access to services and their rights. But it has to be anchored in the traditional work that we have been doing in the statistical community for 50 years on civil registration and vital statistics, in order to create sustainable and sustained systems of information that can help countries not only in a particular moment, but I mean over time. And this is why we have these holistic approaches. And this is what the UN system has come up with. And I think this is an opportunity for me to thank my colleagues. We had this legal identity expert group with the leadership of UNICEF and UNDP and UNDESA and the statistics division in therein. And we have gotten the act of the UN system together. That's no small feat, I can tell you. We are here at the UN. I'm part of them. I mean, and we have reached out and we have established a wonderful partnership with the World Bank on the ID4D program. So I think we are all aligned to work together. We know there are issues. We heard it from the countries. We have to be careful. There are issues of data protection, data security. I mean, I always say Superman principle, with great powers come great responsibilities. So I think we know what we are doing. We can build on the history of the work in the civil registration vital statistics area, and we can use the modern means of the digital identity potential. And so I can tell you the UN system is committed. We stand behind this, and we do not stand alone. We have partners, so this is for me also the opportunity to thank our two partners for this event. I think it was phenomenal to work with Idrc, the Center of Excellence, and the Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data. So, and we will continue to do this, and we work with each and every one of you. You will not be left out of this room without making a commitment. I guess we are preaching a little bit to the converted when we have these kind of events. but each and every one is important. You have a role to play, whether you work for a country or an international organization or an NGO or media or whatever it may be. This is a real issue. There are vulnerable groups, children out there that need our attention, and we are all committed to work on this. So think about what you have already done and do more, and then this will have been a phenomenal lunch. So thank you to everybody in this room. That's it. You're free to go.